All right, we are about to close out the first module here by talking about some of the the policy process. In other words, how do we implement like policies? How does the government institute policies? And also talk about some of the current challenges we have as a society that our government is trying to deal with. Talking about making public policy, I think it's fair to say this is a very long and complicated system that we have. Generally, if we end up making policies, there's a whole lot of people that have a say in the what we ultimately get. Citizens, businesses, industries, interest groups, labor unions, political parties, Congress, the courts, federal departments and agencies, and the president. So we want to, I don't know, problem that we have right now might be, let's say, education. What should we do at the federal level about education? Well, that's a very complicated question. So ultimately, if we do create a policy, input is going to come from all these groups I mentioned: citizens, businesses, industries, interest groups, labor unions, political parties, Congress, courts, federal departments and agencies, and the president. And ultimately, what we tend to get is something, because of the compromises that go into it, something that probably not anyone is actually thrilled about. It's not something typically that we end up with that an individual or group by themselves would design, but it's something that basically enough people can live with that it gets passed. This has been likened to the sausage making, right? Do you like sausage? Well, if you do, you probably shouldn't visit a sausage factory because the process of making it's pretty nasty and disgusting, and you probably won't want to eat sausage again. Policy making process would be you identify a problem, gets put on the agenda for a policy is formulated to deal with it. The policy then is enacted, it is implemented, and then we get evaluation later. So, identification. In this case, I mentioned education. In this case, we see a problem in that, I don't know, students are graduating high school but don't have the knowledge they need to get good jobs or whatever. So we know this is identified. People who work and people who have gone through the process will notice this problem and they will complain to their elected officials about it, which means that it will get usually put on the agenda. Elected officials want to keep their jobs. They see their constituents are upset about something, they will generally try to do something to address, if not the problem itself, at least address the concerns of their constituents. If they then, once it's put on the agenda, then elected officials, along with outside interests, including, like I said, individual citizens, unions, business leaders, et cetera, will come together and try to write up some or create some kind of formulate a policy to try to improve outcomes. This is a long process, lots of debate, back and forth, compromise goes into it. Ultimately, if they can all agree on something they can live with and it passes Congress, it will get enacted. Enactment is when Congress passes a law to deal with the problem. Once the law has been passed, federal departments have to implement it. So we do some kind of education reform. We now have new standards that everybody has to meet or live up to, or at least try to. And these standards are implemented and enforced through usually Department of Education, federal level, state level, perhaps through state departments of education and local school boards. Once this is in place, it will be evaluated. This may take a few years. We need to wait a few years and see what the outcomes are. 5 years after this new policy is implemented, are students graduating now more knowledgeable than they had been before it went into effect? If the answer is yes, they're more knowledgeable, then the policy is probably, at least to some extent, a success. If they are equally knowledgeable or less knowledgeable, then the policy is probably a failure. So when we evaluate it, we'll look at what's happened since then and decide, is this policy one that's worth continuing, or do we need to scrap it? If it's worth continuing it, are there areas where we could make some improvements to it? That is evaluation. So long process basically to get policies enacted. All right, some key terms here: responsiveness and equality. Responsiveness is the idea that government should implement laws and policies that reflect the wishes of the public and any changes to those wishes. So not really controversial here, I don't think. Equality is the idea that individuals are equal in their moral worth, and so must be equal in treatment under the law and have access to the decision-making process. Again, not really controversial here. These are, again, more ideals than anything. We don't, I would say it's fair to say, don't completely live up to either of these, but these are more aspirational. These are goals we should be trying to work towards, even if we don't necessarily completely live up to them. If you try to be a good person, the point is, again, to try. If you try to be a good person, you're not going to be perfect, but you will be probably a better person than if you don't try. All right, some current challenges we have. I would say the federal budget, political polarization, technology, changing culture, and international affairs. Let's talk about some of them right now. Here is the federal budget for 2024. As you can see, we have total outlays. In other words, money spent is $6.8 trillion. Revenue, this is the money coming in, is $4.9 trillion. So as you can see, almost a $2 trillion shortfall there. So we are spending more money than we are bringing in. And if you look at where this spending is going, of the 6.8 trillion, 4.1 trillion is going to mandatory spending, 1 point, and didn't mean to do that. And interest is also taking almost 1 trillion of it. Let's look at where the money is coming from. As you can see, half of it comes from the income tax, about 50%. Another, a little over a third, comes from the payroll tax. What is the payroll tax? This is basically what funds Social Security. Social Security is kind of its own thing, separate from the federal budget, because it's funded through payroll tax, not through the general budget. Beyond that, we have corporate income tax, which is about 11%. We have estate tax, which is basically an inheritance tax. I think if I don't know the number off the top of my head, I believe it's like $9 million. So if you inherit more than $9 million, you have to pay taxes on it. Less than that, you don't have to. I think that's right. I could be wrong. Excise tax, 2%. Miscellaneous fines, etc., is 1%. And also, do this so I can see. Yeah, customs and duties, 1%. What customs and duties are basically tariffs. So given that we are implementing more tariffs now, it's possible, I'd say probable, that this will increase, though I don't see it increasing. Well, I mean, significantly. If it goes up to 2%, it's doubled, so that's a significant increase. But I don't see it getting anywhere close to. It might pass up this and this, but probably not going to get to 11%. Probably. Could be wrong. Who knows? I don't know. All right. So here's federal spending. Where does it go? Well, as you can see, Social Security, about 21%, a little over a fifth. Healthcare and Medicare is about a fourth. Defense spending is about 13%. Sorry, the bars keeps getting in my way. Interest on debt is about 11%. Veterans about a little under 5%. Education, a little over 4%. International affairs, 1.4%. Which, of course, creates some quandaries here. If we want to get the budget under control, in other words, we want to reduce the shortfall, then we are going to need to either raise taxes or make some cuts. Neither one of those is going to be particularly popular. So, where can we cut in the federal budget? Well, Interest on debt we pretty much have to pay, or we will stop getting loan money, which would crash the economy probably. All these others are very popular. Social Security, Medicare, try cutting those. You will have people start seeing their benefits cut. They will be very angry. Veterans, you probably don't want to cut funding for them either. If you do, again, lots of anger there. International affairs, really, this is, if we take polls, international affairs is the only area where people favor cuts to the budget. But look at this, it's only less than 1.5% of the budget. You eliminate it altogether, it would barely make a dent in the shortfall. So the point I'm making here is that we're going to have to make some tough choices. Do we want to cut popular and good programs? Do we want to raise taxes? Do we want to do a combination of the two? Of course, you raise taxes. A lot of people aren't going to like that either. So what do? I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. Polarization is another problem, I would say. If you've been on social media, you know what I'm talking about. Here is sort of this is what's called a Likert scale. In other words, we go from one extreme to another extreme, usually on like a 1 to 5 or 1 to 7 point scale. So you got progressive left, establishment liberals. So this would be progressive left would probably be what might be called the far left. Establishment liberals would probably be sort of typical liberals. Democratic mainstays, moderate liberals, moderate Democrats, outsider left, centrist liberals, then people who are truly in the center. Then you have sort of the moderate right, I would say both of these groups, mainstream conservatives, and then the far right. So most people fall somewhere between these two. Not everybody does. Libertarians don't really fit perfectly on here, but I would say 95+% of people fall somewhere in this scale. If you look at polarization online, which we got at, about 40% people say they never post or share anything about political or social issues on social media, which is probably they have better mental health than people who do. Try sharing something that can even be remotely considered political. Be prepared to hear from people you have not talked to in years to swoop in and tell you you're an idiot. So look at it. Don't want to post or share things be used against them. Don't want to be attacked for their views, blah, blah, blah. So this is probably not great in that I think for a democratic republic to work, there needs to be like some ability to discuss things calmly and rationally without basically being an asshole just because you see something you disagree with. So these are some problems we have, and yet, you don't want to know a secret? Things are actually good. Humans right now, if you are living in the United States, or probably any country in the developed world, you are living better than any humans have ever lived in the history of planet Earth. 100 years ago, the life expectancy was under 50. Today, it is about 80. Infant mortality rate was like 1 in 3 or 1 in 4, something like that. Today, it's like 1 in 4,000. We have air conditioning. I'm recording this in late July. It will be 95 degrees outside today. Yet I'm in my air-conditioned office. You don't think most people in history would have killed for this? You don't think that a lot of people in the world today would, for sure. We don't have to worry. Our problem now is not starvation. It is obesity. It's a problem, but it's a better problem to have than famine, which is what most humans throughout history have dealt with. We have more rights than any humans have ever had in the history of planet Earth. This is especially true if you are a woman or a minority, but it's also true if you're a white guy. Does this mean, so we have longer life expectancy, greater wealth than ever, more stuff than ever. We can travel more freely than ever. We have more comfort than ever. We have better healthcare than ever. All this stuff is completely undeniable. We are the lone superpower in the world. We have one of the highest standards of living in the world. We have the 99% of people who've ever lived in the history of humanity would trade places with us easily, gladly. Now, I don't want to get too optimistic here because that doesn't mean we don't have problems. We have all kinds of problems we have to deal with, we have to solve. There's no guarantee all these good times that I've described for you. These are the way we're living today is very, very atypical in terms of how most humans have lived. And so we are very much outliers here. This does not mean that this will continue forever. It may not. We may have a civilizational collapse. It's possible. I don't know. Who knows? There is no guarantee this will continue. We've only gotten here because we have worked hard, and also we've had some luck on our side too. And I think that's fair to say. And and if we take it for granted, we are more likely to lose it. But which is why we need to be more involved in politics. We need to be more involved. I don't necessarily mean run for office or anything like that. Just follow what's going on and vote accordingly. Be an informed voter. And hopefully the good times that we enjoy today will continue. Only in America can we be living better than any humans have ever lived in the history of planet Earth and still be convinced everything is terrible. And that is all today for Module 1. You go ahead and look at the other resources in the module. Once you've done that, then you are free. Then you can move on to the quiz, take the quiz, and then it's off to Module 2. As always, if you have any questions or concerns, please reach out to me. I'll be happy to discuss anything with you in more detail. Don't be afraid. I am generally a friendly, merciful person, so just let me know. Otherwise, I will see you soon. Have a good day.